Hello and welcome to our today's Coffee and Consulting about the topic Business on the Move, a short overview for travelers in Switzerland and the EU. I hope you are all well. My name is Friederike Ruch. I'm the CEO of Convenus and I have the honor today to lead the Coffee and Consulting. We will focus today on the business travels to Switzerland. However, we also will discuss a bit about the travels in the EU, but that is, as you maybe all know, not that easy because each country has more or less their own procedures, and therefore we focus today on the Swiss part. Before we start, on the right-hand side, you have the possibility to ask any kind of questions during the session. The session will be about 30 minutes, so anything which is unclear or you have additional questions, just drop in your question and we will try to answer everything after the 30 minutes presentation. If we can't do that in now today in the coffee and consulting, then we will drop you an email later on with the answer. As well as in case you have afterwards any kind of questions to that topic, please don't hesitate to contact us and we are happily answer your questions. Also, you find on the right-hand side the possibility to download the slides. So in case you would like to have them later on as well for reading them through again, please download them while we have the presentation. Business travels are something which is, I think, has more or less picked up again the speed and the amount and the numbers as before the COVID pandemic situation. And basically, in whatever kind of country you will send your business traveler or the person will go to, there are three topics you always have to look at. One is the immigration part, one is the social security part, and one is the income tax. And each topic or aspect you will have to look separately on. We now will discuss the situation based on Switzerland and see what Switzerland will do or how they have put down their rules and regulations. If your business traveler goes to another kind of EU country or any other country, then you will always have to look at the national regulations, whatever there is, how they will deal with business traveler. If I compare Switzerland to most of the other countries, then I have to say Switzerland is quite strict and maybe has a more conservative approach in regards to business traveler and all the rules there too. As I said, first thing is immigration we have to look at. And basically, we will go in a second also into a bit more detail. The main question is, do I need to have a work permit for the business traveler coming to Switzerland, or is a visa required, or maybe nothing at all? And if you ask that question to any lawyer, then the usual answer, you will receive the usual answer, which is it depends. And that is also what we will look in a second as well. It depends really on the type of business travel, or better to say, on what the business traveler is doing in Switzerland. And there it really depends very much on what he is doing, as well as in which function he is coming to Switzerland. Usually, if we are dealing with business traveler then and looking at the tax side to it, then in most of the cases there is no taxation in the country they are traveling to, because we have there the 183 days rule which comes into place, and we will look at that in a second as well. So tax wise we are usually quite good and okay, and there is nothing required to be taken care of. Social security wise, which is the third main topic, um, depending on whether there is a social security treaty in place or no social security treaty in place, depending on the answer of that question, you may need to do something, or there you even have the or may have the consequence that you have in both countries a social security liability. In case there is a treaty in place, then you can basically usually exempt the business traveler from any kind of social security liability in the country he's traveling to. Like if it's Switzerland, from the Swiss one, you just have to get the A1 or the COC, the certificate of coverage. Labor law is something you always have to look at, depending as well a bit on how long someone is traveling to the other country. And there, basically, you have to look at the mandatory provisions. And the mandatory provisions are basically the salary requirement. So the traveler coming to, for example, Switzerland, has to get the same salary level as someone in Switzerland would do. So that is something which is quite important, and the authority are really looking into that. The second thing is that work hours, holidays, bank holidays need to be at least at level with the Swiss requirements. Anything which is in contradiction or is less in case of bank holidays or holidays, that needs to be compensated. In case of work hours, the work hours or work hour regime we have in Switzerland is the one the business traveler coming to Switzerland has to consider. And even in case he is allowed to work much more hours abroad, then is not the idea. Then while he's in Switzerland, he can't work that many hours. So that needs to be limited to the level of Switzerland. What is a business traveler? Because sometimes we see that when we discuss these situations that not everybody has the same idea and understanding about it. A business traveler is someone who is employed at country A and he is working either on a daily basis, weekly basis, or maybe also for a few weeks to another country and is then returning back home. He is not employed in the other country, he is employed in the country A, if you see that here in the indication of that slide. And the purpose for the business travel or business trip can be project wise, maintenance work, fairs, conferences, meetings, visiting the other legal entity and discussing ideas, projects, processes. So it can be basically everything. The main criteria is there is no employment then in the other country. So the employment relationship remains in country A. And it is the understanding that he is also, after a short period, daily basis, weekly basis, is coming back home to the original country. The main point is really the immigration part, and there it's key to see whether the work the business traveler is performing in the other country is defined as employment and work, or whether that might be no employment and no work. And there are each country has their own definitions, and we will look at that in a second. What Switzerland says to that. So that is the first step you have to look at, whether that is employment, yes or no. If you say whatever the business traveler is doing in Switzerland, like for example, just attending a fair, passively, meaning he's not having any kind of speaking engagement or anything like that. He's just really visiting the fair. Then that would be, from a Swiss perspective, being no employment. Therefore, the consequence of it would be, okay, the individual will not have to get a work permit. So the only question you have to get an answer for is there a need of a visa in addition or not? And the visa requirements depend on the nationality of the individual. And there are some nationals who need also from the first day a visa, and there are some nationals, like for example, US nationals, they don't need for the first day already a visa. They can come to Switzerland for up to 90 days without the need of a visa. Therefore, that is then the second question. In case there's also no visa required, then basically the individual can come to Switzerland, attend the fair, and go back without any requirements in regard to immigration, like work permit or visa. In case now we say the work the individual is performing here in Switzerland is really employment, and therefore a work permit in principle would be required, then there is that 8 days exception rule, which we will look in a second in a bit more detail about what that means. So basically, you may have 8 days for each individual where you can say, for those days, no work permit, nothing needs to be required. We have basically two different types of work permits. In case that is required, that is usually we use the notification process or the 120 days permit. Usually we try to, whenever possible, to push for the 120 days permit, because that gives the individual as well as the company the higher flexibility, and therefore that might be then much easier from an administration point of view. We do have in Switzerland 26 different cantons, and therefore they are, depending on each canton, we have to look at how the process will be. The rules, basically, whether a work permit is required or not, are all the same. It's more than really about the process and how you proceed, what kind of documents you have to send in, as well as how the process will be done. What we have noted in the last few years is that the labor market controls have increased drastically. So that is something which you also need to be aware of, that if you send people to Switzerland, see that you do that compliantly, because the authority will check on it. And they are not only just checking on construction sites any longer, they are really going to any kind of company from any kind of branch. There is no difference any longer in that. We said that the first question we have to ask ourselves is whether the business traveler coming to Switzerland, whether that is work, or better to say employment, or is no employment. If it falls under the category of no employment, then basically that means there's no work permit required. We have put down here on the slides a couple of possibilities where you can maybe see what whether that is now employment or no employment. In case you have a situation and you don't know really whether that is work or no work, then we usually advise to go to the Labour Market Authority and check with them, because they are in the end the ones who will have to make the decision. In case you see there's a part of it is employment and a part of it is no employment, like for example, someone will go to Switzerland, will participate in a fair, will not speak there, but then later in the day, he actually will go to the office and will do some project work with colleagues together. So part of the day would be no employment, part of the day will be employment. And if there's one portion of the day which actually falls in the category of employment, then basically you need to get a work permit for that individual. Now, as said before, there is that 8 days exemption rule. So, in case someone is coming from the US to Switzerland for business trips, and we have the situation he's going partially to a fair and partially to will work in the office. And in case that is for a maximum period of 8 days, now calendar days, then no work permit is required. Now, the 8 days in a calendar year are the total number of days. So, in case he will need to come again for a ninth day, then a work permit would be required for that period. What is also not or should not happen is that you know exactly the individual will have to stay longer than those 8 days, but you, because of timing or whatever, you first use the 8 days exemption rule, and then thereafter you would just only require or apply for the 120 days permit. That is not really meant by law. It should be that in case you have no idea, the individual just have one trip planned, and then thereafter there's a decision taken that he needs to come again, then you can first take the 8 days exemption rule and thereafter then request the necessary permit. Now, the 8 days, as I just explained, is for someone being employed in a by a non-EU EFTA employer, meaning the employer has no legal entity in the EU EFTA member state, the employer. So, in case the employer is situated in an EU EFTA member state, then basically the employee has not, or not each employee has 8 days they can come to Switzerland and work here without a work permit. Then it goes one step ahead, and it is you have to look at the company level as well. And the company, though the legal entity, has the possibility to send for 8 days employees to Switzerland without the need of a work permit. So, if, for example, the German legal entity has sent for 10 days already someone to Switzerland, and then the individual is coming just for one day, that basically means the 8 days have been used up already. So for that additional day for that individual, a work permit is required. If we have clarified that question, then we have to look at what kind of or what type of work permit can we actually request. And I said earlier there are two possibilities. One is the notification process or the 120 days work permit. And there again, it depends where the sorry, where the employer is situated. If the employer is situated in an EU EFTA member state, then I do have both possibilities. In case the employer is situated outside the EU EFTA, then I only have a possibility to get a 120 days work permit for my employee. And there then it doesn't matter which kind of nationality the employee has. So let's look at the two permits we can request. One is the online notification. You may have already made your experiences with it. It's quite straightforward, quite easy. The only thing is that it is not really that much or that practical. In case you have someone coming really just for 2 3 days and you know exactly the individual will not come again, then that's easy and no, and maybe the best option. However, if you have someone on a regular basis every month coming to Switzerland, and then that might be not really the best situation or the best option, because you would have to notify the exact days. And in case there's a change, you have to basically cancel that if possible and then redo it. And depending on the period or depending when you get be aware of that, you might be able to do that, or you might not even be able to do that. Therefore, it is quite a huge administration behind it. There are a couple of positive parts as well. First of all, there is no cost. You can do that online. It's quickly done. And as soon as you've done the notification, the individual is okay to come. In regard of the cost part as well, and if we look at the salary level, where we look in a second as well to it, there he needs only the lower level, the lower quartile of the Swiss equivalent salary. Therefore, from a cost perspective, that is also the better and the easier option. But on the other hand, the administration is quite something on top of it. Also, you have to consider that if you do the first notification, there is a 8 days period in which you have to do the notification. So 8 days in advance, you need to do that in order to be compliant. The last thing which is we are struggling sometimes is that each legal entity has only 90 days per year. So it doesn't matter how many employees a company has or legal entity, it's really just those 90 days and then it's done. The most of the authorities will tell you that you should first use the online notification and then thereafter the 120 days work permit. Now, in practice as well, in case there is a good argument and justification, you can straight away request the 120 days permit, and there's no problem at all. And usually, the authority will then also agree on it. There are only a few cantons which are quite reluctant in doing that. The 120 days work permit would be the second option or the other option basically in Switzerland. And the 120 days work permit can be basically for a period of 12 months requested. So, for example, from the 1st of April 24 to the 31st of March 25. And then within that 12 months period, someone could come to Switzerland for up to 120 days and use that for all the business trips. Or the other option would be to just have it for a limited period of 4 months as maximum. There's no quota, so you can request as many 120 days work permits as you need. There's no limitation to that. The only thing is that the individual needs to be a specialist and he has to have at least 2 to 3 years work experience plus a university degree, or 10 years of work experience if there's no university degree available. In regard to the salary, there we have to look at the median value. Therefore, it is a bit higher than what we need for the notification process. Based on that, it costs a little more, as well as you have to file an application, which usually takes at least between 2 and 4 weeks, and there are governmental charges for that as well. Whereas for the online notification, you don't have that. Sometimes it gets forgotten that there is for certain nationals, now nationals who usually need a visa for coming to Switzerland in case they stay above 90 days. Like, for example, also the American national we were talking earlier about, he can come to Switzerland for up to 90 days without any visas. Now, if we request a 120 days permit, he will have to claim a visa as well. And the Schengen regulation is coming into place there. So he needs to make sure that, first of all, he will not spend more than those 120 days in that 12 months period for the period we have requested the permit, as well as then he has to consider the Schengen regulation that he should not stay more than 90 days in any 180 days period. So both of it has to be both conditions have to be met. Therefore, that sometimes gets forgotten, and there the checks at the customs are quite heavily. Therefore, make sure that those people will also look at the Schengen regulation in addition. Based on the Posted Workers Act, there is the need of taking care of the mandatory requirements for mandatory law requirements for Switzerland. And there is usually, or the focus is on the salary level, on the working hours, holidays, and bank holidays. That is the majority. I mean, there are a couple of others as well. We have listed some here. You have to consider, but basically those are the ones I just named, are the ones the authority are focusing on. If you look at the salary level, then there are 2 or 3 tools now available in Switzerland where you can run a calculation and see what the equivalent Swiss salary level is. This one is the Salarium, which is now being replaced by the Entsendungsrechner, but both are the same, work the same way. And basically, if you then see on the right-hand side on that slide, you see the information coming out of the calculation where you see on the first line the female salaries, on the second line the male salary. For the online notification, we can use the lower quartile, which would be the 14,393 Swiss francs. And for the 120 days permit, we need to use the median, which is then the 16,420. And there you see there is a huge difference on from a salary level. Now, the business traveler will not be here in Switzerland for a full month. Therefore, the taking now the full monthly salary is not what you have to pay the individual. You basically have to look at the salary level the employee has today, so at the gross salary, and you can just take really the gross base salary, not any kind of bonus or any other type of employment income. If we take that example here, so the base salary of the employee is 6,400. We have calculated with the Swiss, the 6,400 is the one he needs in Switzerland, so the Swiss salary level. However, he only receives 5,600 per month, so there is a difference of 800. The 800 we divide by 20.66 days because that's the average number of working days in a month, and multiply it with the number of days the individual has physically effectively worked in Switzerland, which comes then to 369.34 Swiss francs. And that is actually what the individual will has to receive in addition to his base salary of 5,600. So it's not the 6,400 you have to pay. So just really the equivalent portion for the number of days he had been working in Switzerland. That's basically from an immigration perspective. In regard to taxes, that is something which usually we don't have to really look into that much because if there is a double tax treaty between the country the employee is coming from and Switzerland, if we take Switzerland as the country where the business trip is going to, then we can look at the 183 days rule. And there is basically if someone spends less than 183 days in Switzerland, we usually use the calendar year. Now you have to look in the double tax treaty whether there is instead a 12-month period considered or the tax year as well. In addition, no compensation should be paid out of Switzerland, which is usually the case if you have a business traveler because he is employed and remains employed abroad. No cost should be charged to Switzerland, and Switzerland should not cover any kind of cost. That is usually also the case because also trips and the hotels and whatever would be paid by the employer and not by the legal entity in Switzerland. And if all those three conditions, which you will find in the double tax treaty, are met, then can be already quite certain or quite have a good chance that there will be no taxation in Switzerland. Switzerland has just brought up one additional fact, which is the factual employer principle. So, in case the employee is integrated while being in Switzerland, then the situation looks a bit different, and then still there could be taxation in Switzerland. But I think the majority of the business traveler you would get around with taxation in the country the business trip is going to. And the last part is really in regard to Social Security. That is something which you really should keep in mind that you need to have the A1 or the certificate of coverage from the first day the individual is coming to Switzerland. And that is also valid if the business trip is going to any other EU member state, because the authorities will really look at that. And in case there is a labor market control and there is no A1 or certificate of coverage can be provided, the labor market authority has the right to tell the individual that he needs to stop to work. Therefore, that is something which you should really look at. And that was also the overview about the general aspect about business trips to Switzerland. Before I finish the current session, there is one question: is the 120-day rule not existing anymore? I'm not quite sure what kind of 120-day rule is meant. I never heard of that. There is, from a tax point of view, there's just the 183 days rule. And from an immigration perspective, we have 120 days permit or a 90 days permit, which is the notification process. So I'm not quite sure where such a rule is coming from. Maybe if you can help me with that and drop me an email or call me, I'm happy to answer your question then thereafter. Otherwise, we don't have received any further questions for the moment, so I assume everything is quite clear. In case you have, as said, any other questions, then just let us know. We are happy to support you or direct you in the right direction. Before I end, I just want to tell you about the next few things you can expect from us. There is a Swiss Global Mobility Conference we are planning at the moment, which will be next year in 27th and 28th of March 25, which will be held, and you will receive further information from us thereafter. The next webinar, which will be on the 30th of April, which will also be about Business Traveler, and there we will focus in all the details a bit more. So if you would like to have more information and more insights to that, then please register yourself and we can then happily discuss that together. And our next seminar will be on the 2nd of October, which will be quite a bit time until then. It's about work permits and labor market controls in Switzerland. I hope you enjoyed today's Coffee and Consulting and have maybe received the one or the other idea or information which you didn't know before, or just a confirmation that you've doing everything correctly and everything is fine. I wish you a wonderful week and hope to see you soon at one of our next events. Have a nice day.